me what you look like. Okay. We should probably get started. That the first meeting so this is the third year we've done these grantsmanship training meetings that are they were primarily designed for the MRDA awards, which is Mentor Research Development Awards. Is that right? Okay, I think I got the acronym right. Which are largely focused on clinicians who are trying to get their independent research careers started. We also have, though, this year we've tried to open it up to additional folks. So here, I think you're an MRDA award winner, right? And what's your name again? Corinna Schultz is a medical doctor here at Nemours, right? And then Dula Mann is your assistant professor of chemistry down at Del State. So these are the two folks that are here. If the people who are on the line can sort of tell me who you are and stuff, that would be good. That way, Erin, can we go back to the blue jeans screen? Is it here?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Here we go. I just wanted to see who was online here. So
then click over to the right where it says 8.
Here. Okay. So that none of us have met. That hopefully we'll get a opportunity to meet in person. I'm going to be at the Excel Embry Ideas Conference in next month. But meanwhile, I just want to get a feel for who's planning on attending these things, because the scope of what sorts of things one talks about really kind of depends on the level of prior experience. So looking at the list here, it looks like we have Chang King, or I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right. CHANG QING? Chao Ching.
And they may be in the process of joining.
Okay, so we don't. How about Curtis Johnson? Can Curtis introduce himself?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm a new professor in biomedical engineering at UDEL, and I'm got sent this link through the department, and I'm just here to learn.
Okay, cool. And so we have Dula Mann, who is chemistry, Del State, and then Corinna Schultz. Now, remind me what your research area was. I read all the MRDAs. I just don't remember whose is whose.
Patient portals in parents.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So, so where basically, if I remember reading the proposal, then that's where parents have the opportunity to log in and see their kids' lab results. Exactly. And the question is looking at the unvarnished lab results a good thing or a bad thing?
Exactly.
Okay. All right. So then we have Jake D. I don't know who D.
Jacob Drew.
Jake Drew.
Yep.
Can you introduce yourself? Jake, are you there?
There he is. There you go.
Oh, okay. So it's Cham? Cham?
Hi, yeah, this is Cham. I'm the Associate Director of Research Informatics in Christiana Care, and I am planning to attend the IDEA conference in February.
Okay, good. So you do research informatics at Christiana. Okay.
That's right.
Okay. All right. And how about Yuri Markushin?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yep, perfectly.
Yes, I'm from Delaware State University, working on cancer research, applying optical methods for early diagnostics of ovarian cancer.
Okay. And which department are you in?
Physics department.
Physics, okay. And Zubar Aghai, maybe? I'm butchering names, I apologize.
Yeah, so hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, so I'm Zubair Aghai. I'm a neonatologist at Nemours. I'm a professor of pediatrics, and my area of research is aspiration, the gastric aspiration into the lung in premature babies.
Okay. And you're one of the MRDAs, because I remember reading that proposal. Gastric reflux. Okay, so I think I got everybody but Jake, I believe. Can Jake Drew tell us about himself? Can you hear us? No, I guess he's not picking him up. Okay. So what we have here is a mixture, it sounds like, of scientists who probably have backgrounds somewhat similar to mine. And then we have clinicians who are working on trying to get very translational research projects done. And I believe we have one engineer as well who is trying to understand cost effectiveness and outcomes research in cardiovascular medicine. So so now I will go back to the schedule here. So one of the things, since I will have a general idea now of the backgrounds of people that are going to be coming, I just want to tell you sort of what this scope is. One thing that I want to say is that because the primary target audience are MRDA investigators, that the scope of these sessions are very fundamental. So I'm not assuming much prior knowledge in grantsmanship. If you have a lot of prior knowledge, these may or may not be the best for you. However, if you're sort of new to this idea of trying to get your research funded, this is really what the scope of these sessions are. Now, so I think we introduced sort of the scope of it, and I'll get back to the other thing I kind of want to hear from people is a discussion of what you feel that you really don't understand, or that resources or information you think you need to be successful, you're having trouble getting. But before we go there, I want to just go through how the sessions work out. So the next session will be the first of the actual structured grant writing sessions. And this is basically an introduction to how to think about specific aims, how to develop specific aims, and how to develop a research plan. Very much with the idea of trying to get you to think about developing your research plan as a marketing plan for your research, which sometimes folks get so wrapped up into the details, they lose the fact that they need to market the big picture of their research. And I've been on NIH study sections for more years and more study sections than I care to count. And I have made a list of all of the dumb mistakes I've seen people make that have torpedoed their research before it even really got to a consideration of what their science was. And the session comes out to be sometimes almost more what not to do than what to do. But the goal here is to really think about your job is marketing as much about science, because I'm not able to mentor your science in most cases because your areas are very far from mine, but I want you to get this idea of marketing your research. Okay, the next session is actually putting together the application. That one really big mistake, particularly junior investigators make, but even senior investigators make, is that they completely focus on the development of their research plan. They might put together a brilliant research application, but they then give all of the rest of that information in the grant short shrift. They don't do a good job in their facilities page. They don't do a good job in their environment pages. They don't do a good job in their things like their human subjects page or their animal subjects page or whatnot. And that is enough to torpedo a grant. It's even enough that if a grant even gets a high score in peer review, that I know of applications that were not funded because the people at the program office were so concerned about deficits in the other pages. They did not fund the proposal. So that this is another case where I can tell you about things I've seen. We can talk about using an NIH grant as a framework, the sorts of things you really have to care about, some strategies about getting that done effectively. But we're also going to, when we've done this in the past, we've been able to bring a Nemours grants pre-award expert in, basically the people at your institution that help you get that thing submitted. The goal here is to make sure you submit a compliant application that is not going to get bounced, sometimes 2 or 3 days after submission because it's not compliant with the rules. And that's what those pre-award experts do. And investigators find them very irritating. But their goal is to make sure that your application actually gets considered, which there are many cases where applications have not been considered because these parts weren't in place. Okay, so then the next session is an introduction to the NIH and how it's structured and the diversity of grant applications. A lot of people are so focused on the idea of a R01 grant, the individual investigator grant, that they don't think about the diversity of grant funding and grant opportunities at NIH. Also, there's a lot of people who, even seasoned investigators, that really don't understand the process of how NIH does its grant review and its grant making. So the purpose of that is to really talk about those issues. Because knowing what happens to your grant helps you understand the process, and it also helps you strategize your application to be maximally effective through the process. The May 19th session is talking about dealing with grant critiques. And the take-home message of that is really going to be, your grant critiques are not written for you as the audience. They're written for the NIH program officer as the audience. And actually, especially at the NIH grant reviewers are instructed to not educate, inform, or tell the investigator how to improve their grant. We're instructed to only provide information to the people making funding decisions about whether that grant is meritorious or not. Which means is that you have to be able to translate wording that is not written for you in such a way to try to understand it so that you can revise your application effectively. And that's what that May 19th symposium is. Now, the very last one, it looks like it's probably going to be the first week of June sometime, and we need to work this out, is that talking about other significant sources of grant support. Now, one really large one is the small foundation world. However, I always feel that this session is particularly important because we have a lot of people doing comparative effectiveness research, doing your sort of research, by pointing to Corinne here, who is working on something that I would almost put in the category of social science research as much as anything. And it's a kind of a different world, and it's a world that I personally have no expertise in. So that we try to tag team this with somebody who's aware of comparative effectiveness research, things like the CORI and AFRI and those sorts of agencies, as well as to really talk about resources for trying to find small grants. One advantage that those of us at UDEL have is that we have some really, really excellent resources for searching for small grants to fund our research, because there are many, 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 many foundations who will fund biomedical research out there. Now, one of the challenges that we've had in the Excel program is that there doesn't seem to be very good databases accessible to Christiana-Care and Nemours folks that are basically searchable databases. I am completely unaware of what's available at Dell State, so I don't know one way or the other, but it's really important to be able to get access to these. One place where you could look is if you have a major organization in your field. Some of those organizations that run major conferences, they have very, very extensive grants databases. I do eye research, and the Association for Research and Vision of Ophthalmology has what I've come to conclude is probably the ultimate comprehensive database of every place in the world, really, to get funded for research in vision and ophthalmology. Some other groups have those, some don't. One reason that I am bringing this up in specifics is that when I read the MRDA proposals and I read about your grant application plans, there's nothing wrong with the plans that you have, but in a few cases, they seemed rather limited in the sense of where places to apply. Like one that really came to mind, and I don't mean to pick on you, Zubar, I guess is your name. But when I read your proposal on the gastric reflux issues and prematurity, I was wondering if you've ever tried to apply for March of Dimes funding.
Yeah, I did not apply to the March of Dimes, but I think that's a good idea.
Your research seems to fit exactly March of Dimes scope in preventing, infant mortality, and they are all wrapped up in these whole issues associated with prematurity. I mean, you get them after they're already premature, but you're also trying to make sure they live when they're premature. And I would be pretty sure that would be within the March of Dimes scope. And I mean, that to me was just an obvious one, but, and I know reading your proposal, you have applied and gotten American Lung Association funding, but there are also, I'm pretty sure, a lot of smaller foundations that deal with these sorts of issues. And I wouldn't be a bit surprised if there were issues dealing with, helping, basically all of the issues associated with kids with long-term problems with prematurity. And, sometimes they're very, very small agencies, and to be able to find these, you really need some help. And so I'm pushing again to try to get access to these sort of databases for you folks. And we'll go from there. It would also probably help if you push at the level of your research office, so that, because I really think that is a need for the Moors and Christiana Care researchers to really be able to search with all kinds of key terms, all of the funding that's out there that's in small grants, for sure. So that's what that last session is going to be. And like I said, it looks like it's going to be the first week of June. We just don't have a date yet. And it looks like that we have somebody, I believe at Nemours, who has had significant PCORI funding, who has reviewed for PCORI, is going to be able to come to that, which will help a lot because I can give no insight into PCORI at all. Okay. So that's sort of the structure of what the course is going to be like. Now, I want to take like the last 20 minutes, half hour, and, try to get a feel for if you can think about things that you feel you don't adequately understand about the grants process. And I want to make a list of these things, and I want to make sure I can incorporate them into future sessions.
One thing that's come up in reviews of grants that I've submitted is I do research with congenital heart disease, and it's actually not a rare condition, but it is perceived to be. So it's, it's almost 1% of kids are diagnosed at birth with congenital heart disease, but for whatever reason, it is perceived to be much less rare than like pediatric cancer. Right. And so one comment that I've gotten a lot is, well, it doesn't really have such a big impact. And my work, I'm a psychologist, so my work is really more around how do we support the families to then promote better outcomes for the families and children. And so then I think it's just one step more removed, that they're like, well, you're trying to support the families of these kids who have this rare condition. And And again, it's not that rare, but that's the perception.
Well, I
So I
haven't.
didn't
Well,
know.
I haven't read your applications, of
Yeah.
course. But very often, sometimes it's an issue with marketing, and sometimes it can be a upward fight. That one of the diseases that I've looked at over the years is pseudoexfoliative glaucoma, and there's this perception that it's only found in Norwegians. And there's other studies though that suggest it is the biggest cause of open-angle glaucoma in the elderly. But there's a lot of people who think of this as this niche disease of the Norwegians. And the only way that you can kind of battle that perception is citations, references, hit it directly. You know, say that, you know, congenital heart disease is a major issue with, you know, whether it's, you know, early childhood mortality.
I think it's the most common cause of mortality
Yeah.
and morbidity. And
Yeah.
I mean,
But do you say that?
we do, yes. But I think that when you're comparing it to pediatric obesity, like I think if you're, it depends on who you're applying to. If you're applying to like a general pediatric funding source, they're like, yeah, but however many percentage of kids have obesity or depression or this or that. And if you're applying to the AHA, which is heart, then, well, how many adults have, you know, die from heart disease? And so I think
You're getting dwarfed by somebody,
no matter what, unless you're applying specifically to a congenital heart foundation, but then often you're dwarfed by the medical side of things who are trying to promote more, you know, less mortality. So I got funding through a parent foundation who was very motivated to help support families. So this was terrific. But I'm just wondering, is this a common theme in my reviews?
Yeah, I think it's something that everybody deals with.
Yeah.
And not just the pseudoexfoliative stuff. I study a disease called aniridia. 50,000 people in the U.S. have it. Okay. In some ways that's a lot, and in some ways it's 1 in 50,000 live births. And in the end, you know, I have had NIH grant reviews come back to me and say, well, it's so rare, we need to fund, you know, age-related macular degeneration, which is 60% of adults, right? And sometimes you can't fight about that. But the best you can do is market it with your best case. And this is always the vagary of getting funded, right? Is that you have to turn on the reviewer. You have to get the reviewers excited about what you do. And sometimes that you're never going to get them excited. And other times it's the way you say it. And that's sort of the thing that I'm trying to emphasize is talking about the concept of marketing. That it's not, yes, you have to have good science, but good science isn't going to get you funded, unfortunately. What's going to get you funded is good marketing and a lot of prior productivity. And the good science is sort of expected. But there's a lot of good science. There's more good science that people are capable of doing than there's money to fund it. That's sort of the problem.
And can you talk about in terms of productivity? I mean, what specifically are places looking for?
That's so situational. It depends on your research area. It depends on the person reading the application. Even like at the NIH, I can use this as a good example. I do a lot of developmental biology. And I am very, very fortunate I do the developmental biology of the eye because all of my grants go to eye research-related study sections, not developmental biology study sections. For an eye research-related study section, to be honest, if somebody has a really high impact, one paper in a 5-year period, and then lots of papers in eye-specific journals dealing with eye-specific problems, they're going to think you are like the bee's knees, fantastic productivity. Meaning that same productivity, if that went into a developmental biology study section, would be considered low to mediocre. And it's because in the developmental study section, they're going to be expecting several papers in the top echelons of developmental biology journals, and that they wouldn't even consider a paper in Investigative Ophthalmology Visual Sciences, which is the top eye journal in my field, that wouldn't even be considered as productivity in the developmental biology study section. So sometimes, you know, it does matter to think about how do you market your science to who's likely to be on your panel and who are likely to be your competitors. Because in the developmental biology section, it's all of development, while the eye section is people broadly interested in the tissue or organ or the diseases of it. And it's just people have a very, very different view of things. And, you know, it's part of the getting your research stuck into the right box, I think is a good way to put it.
Would you also, and this is just going back to the question about the really marketing, even if it's perceived as rare, is there a benefit to talking about how what you, I guess the answer is yes, but what you find from this research with this population could inform research or processes in other populations? So even though, you know, this population may be more rare than that population, this is the same.
And then actually, I've seen people who have even taken the concept that it's rare as the advantage. Like there's a lot of diseases in humans that they're generally multigenic, but there is a monogenic form. And the monogenic form is very, very rare. But people will sell understanding how the monogenic form of the disease works in great detail, even though it's rare, because that will tell us the basic principles of disease pathogenesis and go that way. So absolutely marketing it to the most broadly applicable work is absolutely important. And that's something that we're trying to do with my work on this disease, aniridia, because we're funded through the Aniridia Foundation. NIH says it's too rare, but our work is starting to suggest that we might have an answer to all sorts of panocular scarring conditions, which are hugely important. And that way we can say our work in this is going to help us understand some of these diseases that are majorly blinding and are important to lots and lots of people. So, you know, definitely that's part of the significance part of your research, is that to increase the significance by pointing out how your results are going to be more broadly important than your little niche area.
That's right. I have one question.
I might need to speak up. I don't know if they're going to be able to.
I have one question regarding the putting one collaborator. As an assistant professor, is it advantageous to put somebody as a collaborator or consultant? So how it is structured, like in terms of research, moving forward, or money splitting or something?
Yeah. Generally, I don't think people make a big distinction between collaborators and consultants unless there's a subcontract involved. I mean, if you've actually written an application with a subcontract where the person is going to be getting money to do part of the work, calling them a collaborator or a consultant, I don't think most grant reviewers will distinguish those. It's definitely true that as an assistant professor, unfortunately, you will not be given the benefit of the doubt. Somebody who is a long established investigator, you know, with 100 papers, people will say, well, he didn't explain that very well, but I know he'll figure it out. And it's unfair in some ways to the assistant professor, but the reality is, they've always figured it out. So it's not really unreasonable. As an assistant professor, you're not going to be given that benefit of the doubt. So if there's so anytime that you're proposing something, if you've done it before, it's very, very important to explain you've done it before, and with references if possible. You know, got an anecdotal story. A really good friend of mine who developed in vitro transcription assays during his postdoc proposed to do these in a grant application to the NIH, and they slammed him because that he didn't seem like he knew how to do these. He was one of the developers of the technique, and he didn't reference the fact that he was a developer of the technique. And, you know, he got his grant on the resubmission when he pointed that out, but it hurt him in his first application. If there's things that you really don't have expertise in, or you don't have demonstrated expertise, it's really important to get letters of consultation, letters of collaboration from people. It's also really important if you need reagents to get letters documenting that these people are going to give you reagents. And some of it, and it also, if you can get these collaborators to actually read your grant. Sometimes, you know, an investigator will call up somebody and say, well, will you give me a collaborative letter because I've never done this? And they're like, sure. Some big name writes a letter. And then the application has a fatal flaw in the research design because of the naivete of the assistant professor. And it's really obvious that that collaborator never read that grant or would have never gone in because the approach wouldn't work. So if you have collaborators and consultants, make sure you actually collaborate and consult with them in the way you've written that section of the research plan. Because otherwise, it's going to look really, really dumb. Also, if you pick a collaborator consultant that is in Chicago, that make sure the letter of collaboration addresses how you're actually going to be working together. That while we all can collaborate through networks like this, and these collaborations can work really, really well. I just published a paper with a research lab in Australia. I mean, it was a seamless collaboration, sometimes easier than working down the hall with somebody because he was so responsive. But it doesn't mean you're going to convince the reviewers of your grant that you're actually going to get the feedback, support, or collaboration that you need if I proposed that collaboration with the guy in Australia, I might have gotten like, yeah, right. So, you know, but if I now write another grant proposing that, you know, I say, you know, we've already published together and this works really well and we communicate this way, there's not going to be an issue. So it's, you know, keep in mind the grant reviewer's job isn't to give you the benefit of the doubt. The grant reviewer's job is to rank applications. So anytime they give you a break on giving you the benefit of the doubt, that means somebody else's application gets knocked down. So you have to look at it from the grant reviewer's perspective. And they're going to be skeptical that something is working unless you can really document that it is working. Do we have any kind of questions or things you want to talk about from the people who are have called in? It's always harder to communicate through the video conferencing thing. But just kind of jump in if there is anything in particular. Like, but if nobody's jumping in, how do people feel, especially those who are in the Excel network? Are you doing okay getting the statistical support that you need so far? I know that we've been trying 2 years ago when we had the first one of these meetings, that a lot of the Excel network resources hadn't been really set up yet. And I know one of the things that was really a focus was setting up statistical support.
So my grant at this point is qualitative research, and there was not a qualitative researcher here at that time. We partnered with someone at University of Delaware, which I just presented this morning, over the Center for Healthcare Delivery Science, who's been terrific. Okay, and so that network, although I don't think at that time she was part of the Excel network, she may be now, but those connections. What's her name? Alison Carpenter. She's the Associate Director of CRESP, the Center for Research in Education and Social Policy. She just started at UD about 1.5 years ago, came from the Philadelphia Food Trust. She works with Emory May. Okay. But she's terrific. And so that has been very successful. I know that the Center for Healthcare Delivery Science here is hoping to, at some point, hire a qualitative researcher, and then so that would make things even easier, but she's been great.
and I believe Nemours has statistical support, and I think there's a statistical support core that's been developed at Christiana Care as well for people who are in network with the researchers. So for those of you who dialed in, I also want to emphasize that we do have those resources available in the network. There's also, for those of you who might have some heavy data and big data needs, the network has a pretty large, and I think developing to a very successful healthcare informatics infrastructure associated with the Excel network.
So like where you can host your data, like where you can physically house it, or?
I think it's a combination of both physical storage as well as people who are building tools and research tools to actually analyze it. I know the people who run it. It's not my thing, so I can't really elaborate more than that, but it's definitely a very large resource here. That from the standpoint of we're in a diverse set of institutions here. I think there's people who've dialed in 4 institutions. That how do you feel about how have you done? I particularly want to ask the people at Del State, but also the guy from the University of Delaware. How are you doing with, in the sense of formal mentoring? That do you have mentors on your faculty? I know the MRDA investigators do because they're required to, but how about that? How about Curtis? Do you have a formal mentor, and how are you doing with that?
Yeah, when I say that I'm new, I literally just started a few weeks ago. So formal, not formal.
You started in spring then?
Yes, exactly. I know that there are mentors. I don't exactly know who mine are yet, but yes, we do have formal mentoring process here in the BME department at UDEL.
That just so that I know, because I work with a lot of the BME types over there. What is your actual research area?
Oh yeah, my actual research area is in neuroimaging. So I develop MRI techniques for quantitatively imaging the brain. So we have the new MRI.
So you're working with the new MRI center at UD then?
Absolutely.
Your functional MRI center. Okay. Sounds good. Okay. That if you run into any problems getting set up with that and really getting sort of the formal mentoring set up, please let us know, because that's one of the things that we're trying to here to really support is make sure that faculty, that young faculty are getting the mentoring that they need to be maximally successful. And and I know that in prior years that there's been people who haven't found mentoring they need. They might have a mentor, but they don't have the mentoring they need in a specific area. And that's one thing we've been able to do is hook people up with mentors that they might not otherwise know about. How about, let me see, how about Yuri Markushan? How are you with having a mentoring process?
Yes, we also have a mentoring system in place in Delaware State University. So I'm aware of the system, and I'm getting some help from local mentors.
Are there particular things that you feel that you could have additional mentoring in that might be helpful to you?
Yeah, I believe so, because my area of expertise is biological physics, but I definitely would be more than happy to have a mentoring related to medicine.
So basically somebody in medicine. Have you been hooked up at all with the people at the Helen F. Graham Cancer Center?
I'm having some help definitely here, but extra effort never hurt, no.
Okay. That I made a note of that, and I will see what I can come up with. How about you, Dula?
Yes, because we are funded from the Delaware Sickle Cell Center, Cobra Grant. So Cobra Grant is structured like this. Cobra internal, we have mentors, like executive members can act as mentor, and as well as because I'm working at Delaware State, so Cobra also asked Delaware State University any already established faculty member can be the professional development mentor. So at Delaware State, I also have one internal professional development mentor, which is not exactly related to my research or specific aim development. But at the Cobra level, we also have another scientific advisor. So there's two mentors.
Okay. And is there any particular areas that you feel aren't covered in that, or do you feel that you have kind of a comprehensive?
Yeah, for the research-wise, it's quite focused on particular area. But for the development of like personal development or professional development-wise, it is not exactly for science part.
That I don't think we've ever gotten a chance to talk to Jake Drew. That I don't know if he can actually hear or whatever, but I guess he's not there. So, all right. So, and how about for the MRDA folks? Like, how about Zubair? I guess you're working with Tom Schaefer, right?
Yeah, I'm working with Tom Schaefer, and Jay Greenspan is my mentor, so I'm meeting them quite often, and I think my mentor is going very well.
Sounds good. Glad to hear it. Is there any, for your research, is there any kind of need or thing that you're finding difficult that we can maybe address?
I think no, I think I'm good, and if I have any trouble, then I will contact you. I'm getting a good help from the statistician from Nemours. I'm just directly contacting them, Jubair Hussain. So he is really a good help to me.
That sounds really good. And one thing I think that we're actually making progress in this whole Excel program, just talking to this most recent class of MRDA recipients, because the first class of MRDA recipients, I think, felt that they had a really hard time figuring out how to find what they needed to do to be successful. How for the MRDA, or actually for any of you, how are your grants offices? I don't know anything about Del State either. Like, do you have a lot of support in helping you to prepare proposals if you've already gotten that far?
At Del State, we basically put everything together and then send it to the dean's office for approval, and then I go to the sponsored research office. They basically just collecting one of the forms and one of the proposal things. And then just before submitting, one person probably in charge of uploading to the portal. So that's the help.
Okay. So it sounds like that. Sounds like if that's how Del State does it, it might be really even extra important to be really pay attention to the issues associated with everything that's not your research grant. Because that some places the pre-award people in the sponsored programs office will vet and make suggestions in all of your supplementary pages. I know that people at Delaware will do that for us sometimes, like in our budget justifications, and they read those really carefully and give us suggestions for improvement. So
for the budget justification, they do screen these things, and then we just more reasonable, we just not appropriate, not the sponsored research office, they do.
Okay, that sounds good.
I feel like they help with budgets and budget justifications, but I haven't gotten other assistance. I don't know. It's hard to know what to compare it to. But my understanding is that they are very helpful with budgets and budget justifications, and that's completely everything else.
Okay. But it sounds like you have a good relationship with them, and you know who to contact and this sort of thing.
Oh yeah, I've already sat down with them because I had no idea the whole process, and kind of watching.
Okay, that sounds really good, because there was a more of a disconnect between the young clinicians and especially at Nemours when we first started this process.
Is it typical for you to get help with other aspects of that, or
well,
because I think in my experience it's just budgets.
Well, budgets is pretty major. Some of it is like we have I'm used to having there's a dedicated support person to, help us walk us through the process, so we don't have to keep track of things. Like they'll say, oh, you forgot to write this piece of the application, and
stuff outside of the budget.
Well, stuff outside of the budget, whether it's the pre-C or the like NIH grants have, I think, 20 or 30 little things that need to be written. It's really easy to forget one, even if you're really on top of it. And I know, like, the person who was helping us put that together, said, you didn't write this, and
I think they'll do that.
Yeah.
I mean, just because it's a box that's left empty.
Right.
But
I don't know that
just the putting it
inside
well,
of that.
well, they don't necessarily help writing things. So very often there are templates for certain parts, but it's more of all of the administrative stuff to make sure that it happens promptly. That to keep track of all the paperwork and make sure, get all of the files together and get it all uploaded and stuff. It's sort of the support that.
It might be different I haven't applied for an NIH grant. It's mostly been foundation and societies.
A lot of them
things,
are a lot
so
easier.
That's so it's possible that they've really just helped with the budget.
Well, helping with the budget's pretty darn major, so I don't want to discount that at all. That's a nightmare doing budgets. Right. So, okay, that sounds good. Is there any other topics that, I've sort of gone through what we're going to be doing in the next 5 meetings. Is there any topics that are obvious that are not included that I can maybe work in?
I'm hoping to apply for a K award, so I don't know if others are as well, but I'd be interested in just more information about that. But
the K award stuff, some of it gets talked about in putting together the application, and it also is really talked about into the introduction to the NIH grant, because the whole K award process, it is rather independent from the R's, from the R grants, and there's a lot of things that need to be addressed in a K that don't need to be addressed in an R grant. So I try to talk about that, but that should be covered.
So I do have a question. This is Zicham. So you talked about the biostatistics, the data analysts help, and I think those are some of the resources that are available and very useful for many different types of projects. My question is, what happens if we run into a situation where we need help in terms of other types of methods? And for example, and I am the engineer whom you alluded to earlier, so I study engineering methods. There are times when we do need to look into other types of methods that are beyond biostatistics, beyond informatics. Who do we talk to, and where do we go to get help with those type of methods? For example, if we were to be needing different types of computer science methods, do we try to get a hold of somebody at UDEL for help, or how do we do that?
Well, from the standpoint, I guess there's kind of 2 ways to answer that. There is the formal center that Kathy Wu is involved in. That's through Excel, and Kathy is a world-renowned bioinformatics person, and she's also got a big interest in healthcare informatics. And she's a professor in the Department of Computer Science at the University of Delaware. And she's also the director of the Center for Computational, the CBCB, so Computational Biology and something bioinformatics. But, so she's a great portal just because of that. However, it's something that I may be able to help you get the connections that you're interested in. The University of Delaware has a very strong engineering school, and the engineering school includes departments of computer science, computer engineering, and electrical engineering. And a lot of the electrical engineers do computational approaches for things. And it just happens to be that my husband he runs the computational core facility for those departments.
That's great.
And I know a lot of people in the College of Engineering. So if you could frame a specific question I could definitely hook you up. The other possibility is that I might be able to give you just some general introductions of people who might be interested in these kind of things. Like I know there's like a professor in electrical engineering who specializes in using stochastic methods to that are basically come from engineering circuit theory to understand regulation of gene expression. And I know that you're doing something that's not really related to that, but I think you I think you mentioned the word stochastic in your proposal, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that's correct.
You know, so there's a bunch of people who have an interest in this sort of thing. I might not be able to put you in contact with the right person on the first try, but I'm betting that by putting you in contact with the wrong person who knows more than I do, you'll find the right person.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
Do we have other questions? Or are we good for today? We're hitting noon, so we're kind of an hour in. If there's no other questions, I'd be happy to, you know, I'll hopefully everybody found this a little bit valuable. I know it wasn't very specific. And we can meet again, I think it's on February 11th. Where I basically will start talking about the whole idea of how to structure specific games and the different ways to do it.
Is Melinda the Love book
on
Thursday? Or?
I didn't put the times on this.
Okay.
The times are like,
because I know in the past,
Yeah,
like, unfortunately couldn't do that.
yeah, we moved the times based on member demand, and they're all on my calendar. I just didn't.
I'm sure Aaron has it. I just wanted it because.
Yeah,
I know they used to be in the evening, and
I think most of them
I
are
wasn't
either
able
at
to do that.
11 or noon.
Okay, perfect.
If I remember correctly. Okay. So with all of that, I thank everybody for coming. And if that you're all welcome to email me if questions come up and sort of thing. And I know a lot of people in the I don't know I know people in the biology department at Del State. I don't know people more broadly at Del State, but I know a lot of people at UD for sure. And I actually know quite a lot of people at Nemours and Christiana just because I've been around for so long and been involved in this initiative for so long. So I can definitely do my best to try to hook you up with the connections that you need.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so
Thank you so much.
so we'll log off and shut down. And goodbye to everybody online.
Okay, thank you very much.